I'm more upset with Greg Biffle. He's the most unprofessional little scaredy cat I've ever seen in my life. He wouldn't even fight me like a man after. He needs a freaking whooping. I'm going to give it to him.
Good day, race fans, and welcome to the Intentional Wreck Podcast, the podcast made by race fans for race fans, from the casuals to the lifelong gearheads. My name is Jeff, and I'm here with my fellow hosts Corey and Finn, and you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio under the name Intentional Wreck. You can also find us on Twitter under the handle intwreckpod. That's at INTWRECKPOD. Boys, our first points race is officially under our belts with Daytona in our rearview mirror. We officially have a win column. We've got power rankings. We've got stats and a whole bunch of other goodies now in the books. How are we feeling?
Nobody saw that coming, I don't think, especially not Finn.
Oh, yeah. I actually almost clipped myself going Recky Spinhouse, and then Jeff going, what was that? And then I go Recky Spinhouse, and then it hits the intro as they announce that he won the 500. I mean, how cool is it? Like, how cool is it for a small team to come out and win? I mean, they've got one driver, and it's actually owned by, so JTG is, JTG? Yeah, it's
Joe Tibbs Racing, right?
Joe Tibbs. It's actually owned by an ex-NBA player, Brad Daugherty? I don't know.
Daugherty,
From the NBC broadcast.
Yeah. So
very cool for him. I like him as a broadcaster as well. Brad
Big
Daugherty.
fan
Like
favorite,
that's
for sure.
that's one of the guys
Brad.
that kind of really got my attention. It's like, this guy's awesome at NASCAR broadcasting. Who knew?
Man tells it like it is all the time. He's definitely fun to watch on broadcast.
do you think if he goes and like rubs it in MJ's face that he's the first black-owned team owner to win the Daytona 500, that it's going to make MJ put like $1 billion into Bubba Wallace's cars?
I don't know, man.
Could we manipulate Michael Jordan so much that NASCAR gets better because of all the money he's pouring into it?
I mean, I think it'd be kind of cool to see more NBA players and other folks like that try and get themselves. I mean, we had NFL players try and inject themselves into NASCAR and buy teams with Alvin Kamara, and LeBron James was talking at one point about getting into the mix.
If you find somebody cooler than Alvin Kamara to buy a NASCAR team, you let me know. Because
if LeBron James buys a NASCAR team, that's a
right.
But
I think that guys like that, guys like Jordan and Kamara and Brad Daugherty and LeBron, all those guys, they do nothing but bring positive energy to a sport that frankly needs it. I think they're great for it, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey, fun fact, Randy Moss once owned an entry into a Truck Series race that Jimmy Johnson drove for. So
why not?
Straight cash, homie.
Yeah, and Jimmy Johnson spun out. It was a Bristol race, and he wrecked himself. I was talking with the guy at work. My man, old Keller is what I call him. He's the old NASCAR fan who gives me all the insight into the past that I'm faking when we get on here. He was really hyped about that RCR RFK, right? I mean, all race long, Keselowski and Buescher, when they were hooked up, I felt like they were the fastest guys. Then you had them and the 8 and the 3 linked up. Like it's the ghost of Dale Sr. and Dale Jr. riding around together. I mean, obviously the cautions are cautions, but how did you guys feel about that?
I thought Keselowski was super impressive. He looked really, really comfortable at the front of that pack for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, you being newer to the sport, you haven't gotten a really chance to see how good of a NASCAR driver that Brad Keselowski was. I mean, we're talking about a champion. We're talking about a guy who has dominated all types of tracks for a very, very long time. And granted, he's on his own team now that he owns, and they have subpar equipment. But yeah, you got to kind of see what we know Brad Keselowski to be. And I mean, they won Bristol last year. They're not just super speed kind of guys, but if between them looking good, RCR looking good with Kyle and Austin Dillon up there at the end, add in the fact that a single car team, JTG, ended up winning this race. I mean, this is really looking good for the early part of the year in terms of competitive balance.
Storylines are there. I mean, you can't really start with a smaller team, getting a playoff position right off the bat. So, that kind of is what it is right there. And the storylines already exist. And the way that the race kind of shook out, you already got some folks who feel some type of way about the race ending under caution. You already have, I believe it was the longest Daytona 500 in history. Which, what was it, like 530 miles or something like that, like grand total? It was some kind of crazy number. Somebody check me, please. But I think that's what it ended up being.
So, no, shout out to you guys. Seriously, I mean, for everybody knows, we all linked up at Corey's house. We had some pulled pork. Is that what you made, Corey? We had like 20.
Tried to.
No, I thought it was good. Kai thought it was good.
You made really good pulled pork, bro. Relax.
We had a little money
shrimp.
pool. We had 40 pounds of shrimp. Pretty much, it felt like I ate 40 pounds of shrimp. I tell you what, if you guys ever get a chance to meet us up at a race, get there early because the shrimp's gonna be gone if you don't get there soon. But I was a little scared because obviously we're all very hyped, and true fans of the sports are really hyped. But we get there, you guys invited all your friends, all of our friends. They all got their drivers if they didn't have drivers already. We sit down, we're getting so hyped. Race starts, green flag drops, and then I'm just like, all right, guys, we're going to be cruising around for a while.
Yep.
Like, how do I tell you guys, this isn't like football,
No.
And I felt like, Jack and everybody did a really good job of asking questions and getting entertained.
Yeah.
But between the absurd amount of commercials and the fact that there's not a whole lot of passing early in these races at all, it was a slow burn. And I was really impressed that everybody kind of stayed in it and had a good time. But
helps.
That first 65, 70 laps was kind of like, all right, I could pretty much just take a nap right now for like an hour and not really miss anything.
I mean,
It's at the table.
It's folding laundry stuff. That's what I tell people in NASCAR. It's like, yeah, you'll get into it, but NASCAR is really like, get that Sunday clean and done, keep in on the race, wait for one of the announcers that can't keep their composure to start yelling, and then you go look at the TV screen like, who's wrecking? And
and you're like, oh no, it's just a Coke ad. Whoops.
Again.
Yeah.
Now, I did see something. I saw two things. One, I saw the
I need to dry it first.
I saw the thing saying that there wasn't any more commercial time than previous Daytona 500s. But then I also saw a lot of, you were mentioning the executives kind of already coming out saying, hey, you're trying to justify it. And what were your thoughts? I saw you had posted some things in the group chat.
Yeah. So that's the thing I had some feelings about this because, statistically, it's worth noting that I believe when they put the numbers out there were actually a few less commercials this year as far as total volume than last year, and that not many more than in previous years. But here's the thing. I don't think I'm alone in kind of feeling as though it felt like there was more. I don't know how to describe that. I really don't know how to put into words that if it was timing, if it was length, of how long the stretches were or what it was, but it tended to feel that way. But here's what gets me is that throughout yesterday and today, we started seeing Fox personalities. It wasn't really executives. I'm talking, I saw Mike Joy getting into the mix, Jamie Little getting into the mix. I saw some other personalities from Fox and some of the other NASCAR folks that a lot of people follow, kind of tweeting some things out like, you don't need to complain about the commercials. And if we didn't have commercials, we'd have to go pay-per-view and there's this and that. And one of the things that really got me about it is that it almost felt like kind of patronizing because, these are your viewers, these are your consumers, these are people who actively pay attention and are watching this and seeing some things that maybe you're not seeing. And to see all these kind of personalities coming out here and essentially explain to us what a commercial is for, it felt kind of it's kind of like, guys, we know what it's there for, but there were some folks that were kind of like, well, don't complain unless you can provide a viable solution. And here's the thing, that's not my job. I'm your consumer, I am your customer, I am the viewer, I'm the person who is watching this broadcast. There are a lot of people that are in charge of producing this broadcast and that are in charge who get paid very handsome salaries, I'm sure, to put this together, who do a magnificent job on basically all counts. I mean, my goodness, look at the way NASCAR broadcasts have evolved over the years, and this is something we talked about in History Lane. This is something that we see on a regular basis. The broadcast gets better and better. They do a magnificent job. So I want to make sure I don't take anything away from these folks. But I'm just going to say now, jumping all over social media to go and start like putting your prime faces in front of this thing to try and counteract folks trying to bring this problem up, that's not it, man. Yeah. Like, you know, you could have said nothing. Like, it could have just been like, hey, you know what? It was unfortunate that the timing happened here. We'll get them next time. We'll try and do better. Like, that's really all that response needs to be, while the folks that are there whose job it is to put this together, to put together a broadcast that folks are going to enjoy, to go and do their job. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm, going too far into it like that. I don't know. It just kind of got me to see those folks coming out here doing it. Well, stop complaining about all the commercials. We'll stop making us think about commercials while we're trying to watch the race.
Here's my solution here, okay? We're already the sponsor sport, right? That's already the thing. Like, if it's not a left turn joke, it's why every time they got to say something, it's the
Wonder Bread.
They're got to mention every single sponsor. How about this, okay? There will be no commercials. There will be no ad time during the race. The only ads you get during the race are those on the cars. So now, 3 hours of primetime television on fucking Fox or CBS or wherever we're running the race. There's no CBS, but whatever. Now, NBC. The only way to get your car at all is to be like, you can only get a commercial if you sponsor the car. If you sponsor a car in the track. There you go. There's your fucking solution. Now we fix sponsorship.
So I look at it like this, right? We just had the problem with the whole NASCAR commercials thing is that it's not a sport that is conducive to on television commercial ad sales, right? I compare it to the World Cup. We just had the Men's World Cup end of last year. Kind of the same thing, where soccer is not really the most conducive sport. Football, baseball, basketball, they all have these like built-in structural breaks. Where if NASCAR was doing that, I mean, the problem is that even the downtime is the uptime in NASCAR, because let's say you have a caution, or let's say you have a stage break, right? Those pit stops are hugely important,
right? And
are an intense thing. There's really, from start to finish, well, there are parts of the race that are more interesting than others.
Right.
In totality, there's not a lot of room for, we're going to cut to commercial for 2.5 minutes. Right, and run 5 30-second spots real quick. It's just not built for it. Yeah. So I think, to me, I go away from let's charge more and then let's focus on the sponsorships on the cars, as much as just give me a pay-per-view option. Like, give me a broadcast that's $20 that I can pay, 10, 15, $20, whatever, a week, and just be like, when I feel like watching a race with no commercials, I can do that.
So right? Here's my counter to you, okay? Because once you start getting into pay-per-view, while I do think that would bring more money, we're talking about something that's already commercially available to anybody. So this is for all of you guys out there that are watching the races that are going, man, I'm tired of going to commercial. I'm invested into the sport. What's going on? Well, if you go to NASCAR.com/drive, it started last year in the playoffs. Every single driver has an in-car camera. Now, there's a select few. There's five-ish drivers a race that have the in-car cameras that get shown on the broadcast. And those are better camera angles. Like this weekend, we got to see Chase Briscoe. They've got that really, really tiny camera, which it was like the size of a thumbtack or, one of these bad boys, right? Even smaller than this. And then you mentioned last week while we were at the race or watching the race, Jeff, that, compared to the Terry Labonte, movie theater fucking film reel that they got out there. They got to take the film out and got to go to a red room immediately because of sun exposure in the car.
If we were a more put together and just generally, top tier podcast, we'd show you images right now of the little camera cut it back to the big camera.
This is for you.
We do all those things. But just trust us on this.
This is for you, cousin Carl. Hey, it's about that big. All right, and they put it right next to his eye, and it just, you see what he sees. Except They have to dash, unless all the drivers are like dog shit vision, right?
You get the blurry dash.
Yeah, you get the blurry dash, and I think we should just green screen that, and then you can put like dancing cats. There you go.
Dash cams available on OnlyFans.
But the point is NASCAR.com/drive or on the NASCAR app at your phone. You can watch every driver's viewpoint during the race, and you can easily switch back and forth. Also, I believe for a small, I think it's like $5 a month or something like that, you can have access to all of the drivers' in-car cameras, or in-car cameras, in-car radios, right? Yep. In-car radios, listen to them talking to their spotters, listening to them talking to their crew chief about those different things. So when they go to commercial or a wreck's about to come out, you switch to that driver thing and you hear them talking about, okay, what kind of adjustments are we going to make? You're going to listen to some drivers talk about very plainly, hey, we want... loose. I'm a little loose here. Let's go ahead and get 4 new tires. Put a half-pound wedge in the car. Lower the track bar. Give me some gas. And then you're going to listen to other teams that use code words for those, things. They're a little bit more secretive. So,
right.
That's a great point, because here's the thing. Like, when it comes to the reaction about folks talking about commercials or complaining about that aspect of the broadcast, where is that? This is why to me, It would make all the sense in the world that, like, all these complaints are kind of coming in, and if you're going to go and kind of put people out there to go and respond that are like famous within the NASCAR sphere, why would that not be the response? Why would the tweets that are coming back on this not be, well, hey, you know what? If you didn't like the commercials here on the broadcast, we can go to NASCAR.com and you can watch all your in-car cameras and you can subscribe. And it's built-in advertising in the most advertising heavy sport that there is. That's when I'm just kind of like, y'all, you could have just hit that one. That could have been it. But
I kind of get your thing too, Jeff. It comes off as like condescending, right? Yeah. Where it's like, well, this is why we have to do it. It's because money. It's like, we knew that.
We know what a
commercial
Tell
is.
Tell it to us and nicely. Right. Okay, butter us up, baby. Come on. But no, seriously, if you're a new fan because of this podcast or for whatever reason, and you're looking for a way, listen, I would pay $1 bajillion to have mic'd up audio of every NFL player. I would pay crazy money to have that kind of access to the NFL or that kind of access to the NBA. Imagine you getting to go watch all of these games and you just hear all the trash talk. Everything. Unfiltered, completely there, right? That's just not access that those sports provide, but that's the benefit that NASCAR does provide. Those in-car audio cams, they're pretty solid quality. If I could recommend some channels, okay, the 8 of Kyle Busch is going to be fucking hilarious. The 23 of Bubba Wallace is a very hilarious thing in that I don't know.
Listen to Bubba and Booty go back and forth.
Dude, he did not like his crew. Great. He did not like his crew chief last year, and it was brutal. And if you are a fan of the sport, or something you can do is go on to YouTube to NASCAR and look up Radioactive. It comes out every couple days after the race. We'll post it out on Twitter, and somebody at NASCAR listens to all of the tape of the in-car radios. And they put like a 10-15 minute compilation together. You can go back and listen to the best of NASCAR Radioactive. Absolutely hilarious stuff. So if you're looking for more immersion during the race commercial breaks, NASCAR.com/drive or the NASCAR app in the App Store. This is not a paid promotion. This is just me. This is how I get by as a fan. NASCAR.
Unless they want to pay us.
Right. And if you wanted to get paid promotions, that works for me. Back to the race, though. So, again, one of the things that I was thinking about is, like, I really like, the Daytona 500 makes sense. It's the start of the year race. But I like the Daytona race a lot better in the fall when it's the last race of the regular season. When it's like, hey, fellas, you had your chance to win a race at one of these short tracks or these road courses, these big skill tracks. But here's the last straw. Here's the last stand. And it's all
400 miles under the lights.
Everything's off the table. That's where I think the super speedway racing really shines. Thankfully, because of how long it was, this race went green for a majority of the time, and it made that pass even quicker. But everybody seems so terrified. We're really struggling to find a package that allows 3 wide at Daytona. They weren't really handling a lot of the bumping too hot. A lot of guys were getting really squirrely the moment they got pushed. And you had mentioned that you kind of, Corey, it's like,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but a picture early in the race, right? Kyle Larson was getting bumps and was just getting loose.
Right.
Like he was getting real squiggly,
Right.
and you don't expect to see that necessarily out of drivers of like that caliber.
Right.
And to your point about the 3 wide thing, what we saw was every time somebody got hung out in the middle, they dropped 15 spots.
Right. And
like they would go straight to the back when you get hung out, you're done. Like they're going right by you.
Right. And that's not anything new per se, right? That's just how it has been. Is in the past they'd go 3 wide because the cars could handle it. They had drafting partners that would stay middle. But it looks like now, it's like, hey, we're 2 lane boys. We're 2 lane boys for a while, and we're not going to press it to 3. I don't know if that's something to do with the way that these cars drive or anything like that. But that's what I thought. How about the Jimmy Johnson and Travis Pastrana? So Travis finished top 15 in his first race back after a long break from NASCAR. Jimmy Johnson, of course, while he did get caught up in that final wreck, I was very surprised to see him started in the rear of the field. Seemed like when nobody else could pass, because we were all watching, right? Because everybody's watching their driver on the ticker at the party, and they're like, "Why is my guy not moving up?" And we have to keep explaining, just wait, it's okay. None of this matters. He's in 30th. That might be safer than 15th. Relax,
Right.
And then it just seemed like the only driver that could move up was the 84 of Jimmy Johnson. It seemed like he was like, okay, 39th, okay, 28th.
Yeah.
Okay, 20th. And then next thing
Looks super impressive for a guy that hasn't done it in a while.
Now, while this isn't this isn't something that you would lose from skill-wise perspective. Like, I'm really concerned about the 84 and Jimmy if he decides to run the different tracks because of how different the car is. But once he got used to the way the car drove in traffic here, remember, he doesn't have to worry about breaking points or shifting points or anything like that. He's just going. So the rest of it was second nature. It was almost subconscious, and there's no surprise. Now, Jimmy wasn't exactly the super speedway GOAT. In fact, if I had to put anything low on Jimmy's list of talent, it took him a really long time to get his first super speedway win. So while he is a 2-time Daytona champ, 500 champ, he wasn't really known for his super speedway racing. So I was impressed. Pastrana looked good. Riley Herbst finished like 11th, 12th, and he's the guy who spun. He was the Sunny D car. We were talking about the Sunny D sponsorship the other week.
Yeah.
He spun out coming to the first one. But
Priest looked good
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Preach it to it, Jeff.
Right, Ryan Priest, up until his tire was sideways. Corey, are you still thinking super speedway is your favorite style of racing, or what are your thoughts here?
I like super speed. This is gonna sound really mean, and I don't mean it to sound mean. I like super speedways when I can focus on the race.
Okay.
And while I loved having all of you at my house,
it was a bit of a
I could not focus on the race.
Gotcha.
Right. So it's like, I think when I can really kind of dial in and watch these guys play for like every single inch, then I like super speedways the most. So
yeah. Now the benefit
it's kind of a cop out answer. Right. I mean, my favorite race that I've ever seen is Bristol Dirt. Like, to me, that is the coolest race that NASCAR has in the season.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of just interesting to watch.
Right.
I think Bristol Dirt is the top of that list. But aside from that, in terms of race styles, yes, I would still say that super speedways are my favorite.
Right. And the two you got to watch before this one were playoff races for all intents and purposes, right? The final race of the regular season.
I saw Dega and I saw Daytona in October.
When everything's a little bit more tense, the super speedway racing is. But for the Daytona 500, I feel like the spectacle, the race season starting, but it kind of, once they get locked in, everybody's so terrified. Everybody's so terrified to make a move and not a lot of stuff going on. So, all in all, happy for Stenhouse. And something that Denny Hamlin had mentioned in his podcast was, and we kind of touched on it last week, right? Obviously, winning the 500 is such a big deal, and it's our Super Bowl because every race gives somebody an opportunity to guarantee them a spot in the playoffs. And for a team like, Ricky Stenhouse in the 47, a team that doesn't exactly have the money to compete every week, or maybe they struggle to bring in sponsorships. Well, now they can approach sponsors for future races this season and say, hey, we're guaranteed in the playoffs. We're guaranteed this. They also know that they're not going to finish any lower than 15th or 16th in points this year. So that's guaranteed money. plus playoff money, plus the Daytona 500 money, plus, all of these various things. So, and they're not a bad team. They're just a small one-car team. He doesn't have a lot of teammates. So, very cool stuff from them. So, again, we had the great party this weekend. Again, thanks, fellas, for that. And also, thank you for your money. Alex Bowman able to slide through after Daniel Suarez. I mean, I tell you what, while the end of the race maybe wasn't the most exciting thing with Stenhouse and the cautions, the pool was awesome because we had Larson, Suarez, Johnson, and then Bowman all in the running at the very end for that. And it was Suarez getting turned late that allowed Jimmy to get through, or that allowed Bowman to get through and secure the $100. But I did not win the Fantasy Live. We'll take you down to victory lane. Here, our man Jeff with a team of Ryan Blaney, Harrison Burton, Denny Hamlin, Bubba Wallace, and Austin Cindric. Tell us about your fantasy team this week, Jeff, in victory lane.
What I really want to do is thank Ryan Blaney, his team, and his whoopty-ass car by the time it got to the end and cobbled over the finish line into the top 10 that really sealed that victory for me. Because if you would have thought, I'd say even about 120 laps into that race, that Ryan Blaney was going to creep his way into the top 10 when at some point there, I believe he had a tire that was like 90 degrees. He had duct tape covering about 80% of the front of his car.
Dude, didn't his tire come off? His tire came off, and it was
he was running on a rim at one point. Had duct tape all the way. You'd have thought he was driving the old silver Miller car from back in the day.
Oh, the Coors Light car, the Sterling.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. My goodness, it was just shiny and silver and gray and beat the hell. And somehow he made his way into the top 10. So thank you, the gift that keeps on giving, Ryan Blaney, to this podcast.
Hey, also, shout out. I mean, Jeff took it for the pod. Shout out Pete White-Tunis. For those of you wondering who know the guy, Slogano in the NASCAR Fantasy League is my boss and friend Pete White-Tunis. And also I should mention, I said on the podcast last week that there are no leagues. I was incorrect about that. We actually figured out how to do leagues.
There are leagues, there just are no drafts.
Yes, that is the trick. So I said it wrong. There is absolutely a league. Finn, if you would be so kind to drop the link to the league and the password, because it is password, so we wouldn't keep it just to the people in this pod. Or the people who watch the pod. Yep. Password in the description, link in the description. Congratulations, Peter White-Tunis and Jeff Page.
Yeah, well done. Well done.
So after that, I think it's time we take a trip down what has become a favorite part of this podcast thus far, and we're going to drive down history lane. So this week, leading into the current Fontana race, we went back and watched the 2007 Auto Club 400. So I've got a little fast facts for what happened and what the background was on this race coming in before I'm going to kick it over to Finn with some more detailed information and some clips and all kinds of good stuff. These guys are going to give you some real good nuggets. But so this race was on February 25th, 2007. This was at the Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, California. It's a 2-mile track. It's a 500-mile race. It's 250 laps. The race time was 3 hours and 36 minutes. The average speed was 138 miles per hour. The pole speed was 185 miles per hour. And the attendance for the race that day was 87,000 people. The purse information for that race: first place won $342,316. Second place took home $249,011. Third place took home $212,811. And the grand total purse for this race was $5,185,360. Participating makes and models that were in this race were the Dodge Charger, the Ford Fusion, the Chevy Monte Carlo SS, and the Toyota Camry. And with that, let's kick it over to Finn for some more detailed info of the actual race itself. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of it all.
Hell yeah. So why did I choose 2007? Well, I wanted to send Corey back to what I consider to be the prime years of NASCAR. That's when I got into the sport. It's when Hendrick was at its peak, right? Jimmy Johnson had just won his first championship. Jeff Gordon is that guy. You also had Joe Gibbs with Tony Stewart, and they've got Kyle Busch wasn't there yet, but they've got young Denny Hamlin and all those guys. And then Roush Racing, right? We were just talking about Roush Fenway or Keselowski Racing earlier, RFK, and how they're a two-car team. Well, in the 2000s, they were dominant. They had 3 champions, I believe. 2 champions. Kurt Busch was a champion. Matt Kenseth was a champion. Carl Edwards should have been a champion. He actually tied for a championship with Tony Stewart. And that got settled on a tiebreaker. So there's that for you, fun fact. And then they had Greg Biffle as well. So 2 NASCAR champions on this team. Not to mention one of the most talented drivers on the circuit at the time, Carl Edwards. And these cars absolutely ripped. We were back in the Gen 4 era, like 850, 900 horsepower on these bad boys. Absolutely ripped. So it was a really fun track to watch. Matt Kenseth, speaking of the Roush Racing guys, did end up winning this race. Fun fact for you, it's the first Cup race to use unleaded gasoline. So it was something tested at the lower tier. I don't know why.
NASCAR goes environmentally friendly.
Right. No more lead in the air.
So I want to go ahead and we'll show some things for the race. I got some fun facts to talk about regarding then and the era of NASCAR then versus now. But Corey, before we get into some of the clips, what were your general thoughts on the race this year?
So my probably favorite thing that I just kind of chuckled at while I was watching this was they keep talking about the young guys. They're talking about Martin Truex and Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin, right? Like, and that's like what I'm coming into this thing and I'm going, these guys are they're like Tom Brady out here. Like these guys are in like their mid 40s and they're still doing this, right? So yeah, that was kind of interesting to see Truex with the sideburns and just like it was. They're really something. The very very early 2000s, mid 2000s style. I thought it was super interesting. Is it me or is the track super wide? It's very wide.
So
super wide.
Right. So what makes this track kind of resembles that of Michigan in that it's almost, I'd argue, it's almost a 2-mile track. It's extremely wide in terms of the amount of lanes. In fact, something that they always do, which they'll probably end up doing, is a five wide salute. All the cars get 5 wide and they just drive by. It's just under the pacing lap conditions. But no, you really get a feel for just how wide, and the track is extremely flat. All right, it's not like super high banked. It's banked, but it's pretty flat. And it drives extremely well, especially in this era of the car. So a lot of you see a lot of fanning out. You see a lot of lanes, guys that can go low, middle, middle high, low middle, and then high, super high line, and it really provides for a lot of opportunities to find grip and find air. And find clean air.
Definitely visually very different than something like Daytona, where when these guys come around a turn. There's no pack. There's no lines. They're just they're just ripping as hard as they can. And you could tell watching the race that when you hear race fans talk about driving on the edge, this is what they're talking about. Right. Like where they're just literally right on the cusp of spinning. It looks like they're always about to spin. Right. That was one of the interesting takeaways I had was, and you see it very early on in the race. There's a huge wreck on like the 8th lap or something, which I'm sure Finn's about to show here in a minute.
That's a perfect segue here. And Scott Riggs in the 10 ends up wrecking. And exactly what you just mentioned is these cars with how high they were on horsepower, and you felt it with the iRacing stuff, right? For sure. When that thing snaps loose, you really lose it. And this is where you started. This is the first wreck of the race around lap 7, lap 8. There's Jamie McMurray's car all torn to shreds. But look here at the 10 car, the Stanley car, in the corner.
10, Gailey up high, Rudem in the 00.
I don't even think anybody touches him. He just kind of gets into the gas a little clean, and then look, it just snap right hard. Like, that's not something we really see in NASCAR. Now, but the cars get sideways, but they don't really snap right like that. And here's a good shot.
Look at that crumple zone, too. Like, that's something that I think is well worth noting about some of these cars compared to the modern cars. Is like, you look at the crumple zone on just about any impact on these cars, and it's a completely different animal.
Absolutely. Another thing you mentioned is on this lap 9 caution, right? The guys are already coming down and pitting for tires. And, most of them I would say are pitting more so for adjustments. This early in the race, you come out, car's not exactly what you want. There's a way more room for adjustments in this era of NASCAR. So I would say that's probably what it was. But also, yes, 10 laps on these, this big of a track. 10 laps of tire wear is a lot of tire wear. And you will find that, the difference in the grip, especially how hard you're pushing a car, is that will be very much that important. So as you see, everybody comes down. I'd argue some guys probably went and got 2 tires. Another thing too is in NASCAR, you're limited on the amount of tires that you get over the weekend, right? It's not just unlimited tires for everybody. So if you come down in a situation like this, and you're going to get tires, you could take them off, and there's a set of what we would call scuff tires. So if you're watching NASCAR, you're going to hear 2 terms, scuff tires and sticker tires. Scuff tires are tires that you had on before, maybe qualifying or a practice session or whatever. You could throw those back on the car later if you're out of sets of tires, but they're not that worn, so at least you have newer tires than other guys. And then sticker tires means just like that. Sticker, the new sticker's still on them. You'll even see when they roll out with them, they just keep the sticker on the tire itself, and that's when you have brand new grip.
Look at Kevin Harvick, dude. Look at Tony Stewart, dude. These guys. Dude, it's so crazy, dude.
So you mentioned this actually to me offline, but this commercial coming up, this is a highlight of the race for you,
dude. I'm sitting there watching this Sunday morning, going, what fever dream am I looking at? Right?
All right, let's watch this. I haven't seen it.
Have you seen this, Jeff? Have you seen this yet?
No, this will be a fresh one.
Oh my goodness!
Here we go.
Oh no!
It's the Sprint Cup champion.
Oh no!
Not the green screen. Is that Bobby Labonte?
Oh my God!
Jimmy.
What am I watching right now?
Here's Greg Biffle. Not on the.
What?
Look at Truex, dude.
What in the Final Cut Pro is this, man?
Bro, it doesn't. I saw that and I'm like, this is the most mid 2000s thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, look at this nonsense, dude. This was like the peak of cool commercial making.
Hey, the 2000s were
so
wild.
Funny that
the early 2000s were absolutely wild.
Oh, we're talking about commercials with the Daytona 500. Where was that? Where was the commercial like that?
So I want to tell you,
it just made you go, "What in the world,
man?"
Dude?
All right. So I've been thinking about a lot of when we have a week off, right? What can we do when we have a week off so we don't double up talking about the same race coming up or the one that just happened? And I think I'm going to find some of the best commercials, NASCAR like paint schemes, one-off situations, but the 2000s NASCAR commercials, Corey, were some of the best comedic gold. So there's a young guy named Casey Kane who used to race for Hendrick Motorsports and Ray Everhand. He's actually the 9 in this race. And he was kind of the pretty boy of NASCAR, as you can kind of see, kind of a pretty boy. And they had this commercial series going of these soccer moms that were obsessed with Casey Kane. So
Casey Kane, where? Casey!
Oh yeah, this is I distinctly remember
where they
this.
lay waste to the entire world in an effort to get to Casey Kane, and he's like, "No, I got to get away." So
please tell me we're gonna watch the Denny's commercials too.
Accident forgiveness, part of your choice auto insurance, only from Allstate.
Jeff, have you seen
gold? Absolute gold.
Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong here. That commercial of them in Hollywood chasing the little thing around. Is that not the goofiest damn thing you've ever seen in your life?
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah. That is just so like somebody gave somebody a green screen and they just went nuts with it.
They sure did. For our audio only folks, if you're watching or you're listening on Spotify, highly recommend going and finding this recording. 14 minutes and change is where the commercial comes in, and it is hilarious.
So I wanted to show a couple more things about this race here. Some things that you had pointed out when we talked about it, and then some things just to kind of share why I'm so excited about this season of NASCAR at Auto Club and just mile and a half intermediate tracks altogether. So again, this is the premiere of racing. I want you to watch this battle. This is going to be between Matt Kenseth, that is Kyle Busch in the yellow 5 CarQuest car, Matt Kenseth in the 17, and Mr. Dale Jr. in this 8 Budweiser Chevrolet. And you'll see a great feel for the different amounts of lines that we have at this track. You know, some guys like Matt Kenseth, who won this race, was fast all day. He can run low and keep it, whereas the 8 felt really comfortable on the outside. So that's what I was really excited, is what this track really gave us during this time period. Was just that, like, look, just everybody has their lane. Look, the 5 gets a little squirrely, so the 8 gets up there, 5 throws a block. This is premier racing for me. Multiple lines, guys are just quick, and sometimes it leads to a big lead, and that seemed boring for NASCAR to some people, but honestly, think back to Homestead, Miami, and Kyle Larson, right? How dominant of a race that one. That was because he had the most skill that day and he had the fastest car that day. So that was just something I wanted to throw at you guys, and the 8 will end up catching the 5, but I think the 8 ended up having some engine problems there. That was another thing too. I noticed I think the 1 ended up out of this race pretty early with an engine issue. There he is passing on the outside. There were a lot, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff, a lot more engine issues would happen in the early 2000s. Guys would just blow the engine because they were just pushed. Yeah. There's so much power in these things. They would just blow them. And obviously the OEMs didn't like that, but for the product, it was way better.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is like there was a lot more of like, well, there's a lot more juice to this thing. Let me see how far it can go. You had a lot more drivers that were much more willing to. It was not quite as tightly tuned as you kind of see now, and a lot more of like, let me save more towards the end. Let me strategize as far as when I want to try and get ahead. So much as I'm gonna just hammer it down and see how far I can go and hope that it doesn't explode.
Right, absolutely. And as we wait for this 3 seconds of ads to finish up, I'll cut this out. So another thing I want.
If anybody wants to sponsor us so we can get YouTube Premium,
no free ads. So I clicked it back here, so we're good.
We did that whole segment on commercials, and here we are showing our own, man.
That's right.
Well, these are the funny commercials. I get down for a good funny commercial. So
it's why wouldn't they do that? They could have shown us the 2007.
Corey pointed this out to me. Was a single file restarts, and let me go ahead and run you back. So if you're not familiar with now, whenever we do restarts, there's outside of the beginning of the race, on every track, we're going to do double file restarts. So that means first place is on the inside, second on the outside, and they're just double file all the way back, right? And the way that something that NASCAR implemented a couple years ago is what's called the choose cone, which is you get to choose if you want the inside lane or the outside lane. So it's not so much first, second, third, fourth. It's if you want to be on the inside lane, go below the choose cone on the inside lane, but you may not be where you were. For example, if you were if I was second place when the caution came out and I was second place riding around, but I want the inside lane and the leader also wants the inside lane, I'm technically starting third. Does that make sense? And whoever the first guy to take the outside lane, he gets to start. It's a little bit of a strategy call based on who's behind you, and sometimes the track has a preferred line. So you will be like, hey, I'm going to take the preferred line, or maybe I'll take the non-preferred line, but that probably means I'm going to end up moving up a couple of positions, right? Whether that be the inside or the outside. Not as prevalent on some tracks, but like on others, like Martinsville, some guys will take the outside lane when when it's definitely not preferred, but that means they move up 5, 6, 7 positions. If they can make it work, they'll make it work. So, what they used to do, Corey, which is, if you think about it now with what we have, it's kind of, I don't know, caveman style. I don't know what we were doing. So first of all, single file restarts for the lead lap cars. So no matter what, you're not going to be starting next to somebody in the lead lap. Always single file. Well, what we're looking at right now is we're looking at a bunch of guys on the inside. There's 2 rows here, right? With what we're looking at, those are the lapped cars. So they let the lapped cars on the inside.
That is dumb and boring.
So they get to now fight. Well, if they can stay ahead, get and stay ahead of the leaders before another caution comes out, they'll get to be on the lead lap. Also, the leader is not the 0-1 there on the outside. That is the cars that are on the tail end of the lead lap. So now in NASCAR, if a caution comes out for whatever reason and these guys end up in front of the leader under the pace car, they'll get what's called the wave around, right?
Right.
And they'll start at the rear of the field. Same for the lap cars. They'll start at the rear of the field. But that doesn't give them an opportunity to race past the leaders, but also that allows the true leaders of the race to be up front when a restart starts. But out here, and what we're about to watch is the leader is about 10 rows back.
Clean up the front of the field here because this gets mighty testy.
I mean, right now, the leader's not even in. There's the leader right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 rows of cars before the leaders. So now we get a restart, and these guys have to fight through all of this traffic. They've got to fight through lap cars that aren't letting them by because they're now on the lead lap as long as they stay in front of the leader. Absolute chaos.
I don't. It doesn't make any sense, man. Like I understand the in principle, right? You want to make the guys in the back race to get their lap back. I understand that, but put the leaders in the front. I mean, this doesn't. If I came into it totally blind, for one, I would have never even picked up on what you just explained there.
Right.
The leader wasn't in front here, but like, this is just no. See, this guy Kenseth, he deserves to have some benefit to having been in front when that caution came out, not involved in the wreck. He's to go to the front.
Right, but like we're watching a lap car take the leaders 3 wide. You know,
that's crazy.
This is when you got to move, got to go.
Yeah. And it also picked up urgency, caused a lot of urgency, because if the leader got caught in a bad lane or somebody, you know, you can go past. And obviously we've got something better, but that was something that you had noticed.
Yeah.
What I did like is you really see the driver talent of the guys that can weed in and out of traffic there versus the situation. But I do like it as it is now. What are your thoughts, Jeff?
I get the.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good.
No, it's like, I don't know. I personally don't think that I'm glad that we have the leaders in the front and lap cars in the back. I understand the concept of it, and I understand essentially why it was that way at the time. It was much more of a concept of, well, if you want to get to the front, get your ass around the track and get up there. Like, you know, take advantage of what's here and run with it. Because remember, this is also pre-stage racing. This is at a different time in which things were not. Some people would say there's more gimmicks now, you know, the choose arrow being something like that, stages being another thing like that. But these are also things that NASCAR came to realize when they wanted to put forth a product that was going to pull in a larger audience. You're kind of looking at it, right? You're looking at what you see now compared to this is a great example of some of the things that the governing bodies have attempted to try and implement just to get more folks to be able to watch and actually understand what's going on basically on first glance, right? As opposed to having to get a little more storyline on what's happened within this race, you know, before they really understand like where everybody's at.
Right. The lucky dog was something that they did to kind of supplement this going away. Is like, okay, now if there's a caution comes out, the first car lap down will get their lap back. So now, instead of fighting the leaders and causing a bunch of problems,
they're fighting each other because they're all lapped down.
Correct.
Right.
So there were NASCAR made smart decisions, but this is part of the reason why I wanted to send you back to the early 2000s and watch this is because it was very, very, and this is the height of NASCAR. You know, this is the early 2000s. We've got a $5 million purse. And this isn't even one of the big races, you know?
It would have taken me a long time at that time to understand the logic behind what they're doing.
Right. But
it's cool to watch Kenseth being super fast in this race and then watching him start in the middle of a pack on a restart and just blow past people.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool. But it's, to me, being in the lead should grant you the benefit of not having to do that. You should remain in the front of the pack because you were in the front of the pack.
Right.
Immediate clean air.
You're going to catch up to the lap traffic eventually, and then you're going to have to deal with it then. But it's not going to be 12 of them all stacked up side by side.
For sure. So I wanted to talk about and show this in an effort to talk about and transition to the current day race, right? A couple things here. First, I'm actually going to skip just a small head and go to this thing that they used to have back in the day. I can't even remember what it was called, Track View or Field View, but they used to have all the car. You could watch this on NASCAR.com. You could pay for this, and it would follow the cars all the way around the track like this, so you could see where they were. But it was incredibly glitchy, and it didn't really work all that well.
Maybe you're definitely coming.
But yeah, this was something that they had in the early 2000s. It was really, really bad. It never even worked like it was supposed to. But very funny. They always had like the right paint scheme. So there's your, the commercials, and then tack on this to get your kick of early NASCAR.
I'd also think that this is part of the. So there is a big kick, and you see a lot of the influence now just in sports in general. But this was very much the dawn of like this exact era, because you're seeing this in other sports.
Mm-hmm.
This is the dawn of the NFL, baseball, NASCAR, and a lot of professional sports leagues in particular, realizing how popular and how significant video games were to the popularity of the sport, and how much of their demographic included people that were playing the games. And you can see that influence of what's happening here, right? So this was at the time in the NFL where you'd start to see like different broadcasts implement things like putting a circle underneath a player and pointing out their name, changing the camera angle in a way that was supposed to look seamless, from one area of the field to another, when they started implementing Skycam and different things like that.
Right.
That's a perfect example of them trying something with that, right? Is adding that virtual element that allowed you to see more of the track at one time, but it was just more of a rendering.
Right. I mean, we were going through an insane level of technology advancement at the time.
Yep.
So NASCAR trying to
text part.
Keep up. Huh?
That was one thing, so one of the things that I wanted to mention earlier when it was on the screen, for one, it's the Nextel Cup at the time. So you have a major phone company sponsor that's doing this, but also there was something when we had it paused earlier that was showing text the letter of the driver that you think is going to win into this number. And that's you putting in your prediction, like the same thing that you do on an app now.
Right.
They were doing that utilizing text messaging at the time, and that was brand new technology. That was the bee's knees to be able to have somebody sit there on their little chirp flip phone and go in and text E to blank number for probably like $1 a text message so that they could make their race predictions. Like, they
didn't have a cell phone in 2007 though.
I didn't even know. Hey, wait till we get to the Brad Keselowski Twitter saga. Okay, we'll get to that in the future, Corey. That's a back pocket for you. But yeah, but no, totally great to see that from NASCAR. And again, with what we talked about earlier with NASCAR Drive, NASCAR.com/drive and stuff, it's just cool to have that access to the sport. Makes it a little bit easier to get into. So this is what I wanted to watch. Obviously, Kevin Harvick's last season. This is back when he was driving the 29 Pennzoil. It looks a lot like Logano's car now. But what I want to do, they have this in-car. They're going to show the dash cam miles per hour for him, and you kind of get a feel for how quick they were going and how much throttle to brake that they're using at this track. So here's on the front stretch.
It looks to me like the gap's closing.
9,000 RPMs. Entering turn one at 203 miles an hour, fully out on the brake, down to 150, 140, 149, 150. They're dropping in almost 60 miles an hour. Seamlessly.
Harvick took a tenth of a second out of
that is insane.
Insanity, right? And what I wanted to talk about is, so one of the big storybook things about this season, Corey and everybody, is 2007 NASCAR was running this this split schedule of this new car, right? We had this thing called the car of tomorrow. So what we're looking at now is the Gen 4 cars that we were just watching race. The Monte Carlo SS of Jeff Gordon, and then we were talking about earlier, that's the 9 of Casey Kane, and that Dodge Charger. You kind of have that trademark Charger nose, right? And this was the what they pretty much ran, late 90s to around 2006. And in came this thing called the Car of Tomorrow. So in 2007, they split the schedule in half. They ran half of them like this, and the other half was done with this Car of Tomorrow. looks wildly different, if you will. It's a lot boxier of a look. They've got this rear wing. The car was a lot heavier. They had this front little splitter in the front that was supposed to be take a bunch of impact, but it ended up causing a bunch of problems. But there were a lot of issues with the car tomorrow. People, they complained a lot about it not being able to drive. Now, granted, it stayed at 850 horsepower. So it wasn't exactly power that was the issue, but I'm going to read you a little bit of a quote about the change. So it said it's well documented how drivers feel about the car. Many saying it doesn't drive as well, and it's much heavier than the old car. That could be part of the cause for the horrible race that occurred last week in Indianapolis. More weight puts more stress on the tire. The result is the Boryard 400. We'll talk about that. But there was a race at Indy where they couldn't go more than 8 laps without people's tires being flat and blowing tires. 8 laps. It was a miserable experience. It was widely considered the worst NASCAR race in NASCAR history. Remember who won that one, Jeff? Jimmy Johnson. So moving on.
Going with Jimmy Johnson. Right.
I figured I'd just let you put that one.
It said, however, NASCAR doesn't want to hear what the drivers say. They had a closed-door meeting earlier this year and told them to keep their mouth shut about the new car. About the new car. The top part, it says, it doesn't need to be said, we've had great races this year, but the fear is that soon we may be seeing a long train of cars around the racetrack because it's become very difficult to maneuver the car. And they talk about how once the car gets dirty air, it struggles to pass. And it's interesting they had those things because we are kind of having the opposite, right? Yeah. And the reason why I say that is, let me take you to, this is going to be the race in, I want to say 2020 is Jimmy Johnson's last race there. And what I want to show you guys is this is obviously with the cars that we have now, the next gen cars, 670 miles an hour, or not miles per hour, 670 horsepower. Sorry.
Wow.
Flying. Shut up. 670 horsepower. And, I mean, the racing was just a lot better. I'll show you that. But remember what we just saw in terms of throttle and brake out of Kevin Harvick in 2007, okay? Well, now you're going to watch Jimmy Johnson fight it out with, there's Kurt Busch, and then there's actually Alex Bowman in this. But that's going to pull up Jimmy's throttle, and you're going to see a significant difference. Now, these cars were 500 horsepower versus the 900 in the car that we just saw. So that's Jimmy in the Ally, 48, and then there's Bowman in the 88 there.
These guys are fighting hard for
so Jimmy takes it 3 wide here.
Johnson going 3 wide down the front straightaway.
And Jimmy Johnson with both of them.
This is not me just trying to show Jimmy Johnson making a good pass. I promise there's a point. But this is the same track. This is the same level of stock car racing. Look, here in the bottom left, that green bar is Jimmy's throttle. Entering the turn at 181, 182.
I would think that you're going to see these guys,
and he stays on the throttle the whole time.
In this race until those tires
and they only drop to 170.
Jimmy Johnson never checked up the throttle.
So the difference being in the race that we watched in the early 2000s, we had 204 dropping to 150. And here we have 180, 170 just gunning it.
Right.
What kind of racing that the racing that it put out was boring. People, you couldn't go low on a lane and pass anybody. You just had to have a significantly faster car. It wasn't driver skill. It wasn't who could get in the throttle quicker. It wasn't whose lane was better like it was in the race we watched from 2007. This was literally just who has the best engine and who has the best air. And then if you get like a little bit of slip up, it's all momentum. Nobody likes momentum racing. Okay? What makes it great is the ability to kind of stay in the throttle. And I went back and looked at some of the lap times. So in the race that we watched, 2007, the average qualifying and race lap time was about 38 seconds, give or take, right? When the next-gen cars were running, during this race that we're watching right now, 40 seconds. So we have 2 seconds slower laps between 2007 and 2020. Now, I did look at last year's race here in the next-gen car. Keep in mind, it was the second race of the year. It was the second race of the year for in next gen, right? And the first intermediate track. So nobody really had setups, and there was no real testing on this track. and those were 41 seconds. So they were actually slower than what we're looking at now. And I was looking at that, I was like, that feels weird because the racing was significantly better. And then I went and looked at Michigan, a very similar track, and I looked at the times of this era of NASCAR with Michigan and the next-gen cars now that guys have gotten used to the setups and the engineers are making the car. 3 seconds faster the next-gen is at Michigan than this is now. So that's why the Daytona was great, but honestly, this is where we start to see some racing. This is the track that one of the tracks I'm most excited about on the schedule this year. I've talked a lot. What are your thoughts on
this? I'm super excited for the race. Just simply for the race this week. I think it's a really interesting track. I get intrigued by I can go 5 wide, right? Like these guys
enjoy it now,
right? I get that, but the design of the track, the width, and the amount of different lines, like these guys are just all over the place in this shot, you know.
And what we're looking here is just for clear. I'm going to play it while you talk and stuff. This is last year's race,
right? I mean,
Denny's car there come off the
they're
apron and,
they're mostly up at the top of the track. You know, they're high, but like these guys are getting all over the place. They're going to be able to make moves. So yeah, definitely. Look, yeah, they're just dropping down.
Yeah,
right. Like
a little harder to throw a block on this track in the way that you could at some of the other tracks.
Right. I mean, right. Just absolutely flying around each other. I mean, the end of this race was fantastic. To the end, you had 3 cars battling it out. And yeah, Kyle Larson did end up winning this race. But, I mean, and there's a nice shot of the Mahindra Ford. No, I'm really excited for this one, without a doubt. I mean, I think it's going to give everybody that's been watching, that's new to the sport, a little bit of a feel. One of the things you asked me, Corey, was like, why is it called 4 different names?
Yes.
So, history, it originally opened as California Speedway. Then it got bought by the Southern California Automobile Club. So now they call it Auto Club. And then they call it Fontana a lot because that's where the track's located, in Fontana, California. Right. So if you hear one of those 3 names thrown out, it's only been in the sport since 99. The fastest anybody's gone on it was 241 miles an hour in an Indy car. Let's see. The current record at the track for speed is Kyle Larson, 38.7. Every other record for NASCAR is pretty much owned by Jimmy Johnson. Most wins, top 5s, top 10s, laps completed, laps average. No, this is
my man's leaning in today.
This is Jimmy's home track. The closest finish was actually Kevin Harvick beating Jimmy Johnson by .144 in 2011. The furthest margin of victory was Jeff Gordon in 2004. He won this race by 12 seconds. I want to read you a Chase Briscoe quote here about the race last year. Chase Briscoe said, "I think dirt guys like Larson, Reddick, and myself, we like it slick and worn out, and you can move around and search for grip. I felt like I was able to try different lanes and try to find grip. I felt like our car was really good, and that obviously helps. But yeah, this place has always been really good for us guys, and I think that's because of how slick it is. I mean, if there's not anything that tells you it's a driver's track and that we should be excited, I mean, that's it."
Sure. I also think, like, going back to what the point you were making as far as the difference between, you know, a race there 15, 20 years ago compared to now with some of the older, like the Gen 4 car, for example, like something you're seeing in one of the big differences I think that you're seeing is the amount of drafting, the amount of pairs. Mm-hmm. You're trying to see in a few more lines in the modern car with guys trying to actually, like, you know, get together and do a little bit more pack racing on a track like this. Right. In the newer cars in a way that you didn't really see in the older cars. You kind of pick your lane, hit the gas and go. Right. And hopefully you get around that turn a little faster, or you have to, you can, you know, maybe you let up on the throttle a little less than the guy next to you and right. You get your brake and you get up front. Like, the draft patterns are different in that era compared to now. And I felt like you had a little bit more, you stood more of a chance to run alone or to run in a smaller pack than you would now. I mean, I have a feeling that on Sunday, we're going to see a lot more, you know, single lines. We're going to see things split off into 5 wide. We're going to see things get dicey as they start coming around some of the turns. But I also feel like we're going to see good portions of this race where you're going to see guys bunched 7, 8, 9 together, just trying to get as clean air as they possibly can to try and move around as fast as possible.
Well, one of the things is when it was that 500 mile horsepower, I keep saying miles per hour, 500 horsepower car, right? All the passing took place the first 2 laps after a restart.
Right.
So NASCAR felt incentivized to have cautions and stages because the cars couldn't, you couldn't catch somebody and pass. Once they had the lead, even if you were the faster car and you caught them. Once you pull it out, you got all the dirty air and it would mess your car. So as long as the leader kept the main line of the track, the preferred line, you had a very small chance of passing them without hitting them or roughing them up. So what now we see is you look at the Charlotte finish, you look at the Bristol Dirt finish, you look at Darlington when Joey Logano was running down Byron. We have situations now where, yes, they get stretched out in single lanes, but the guys find speed. They find speed by cooling the tires off, saving their tires, by being better on the throttle, by working on their setup and creating a faster car, instead of NASCAR having to find excitement in restarts. Because once those guys restarted and they get their couple passes in, they get stretched out, you can't pass anybody. You can't pass anybody unless they have a major handling issue. And that's why I'm excited to have the mount. I'm really excited this year now because we get a full year of it. Guys have more experience with this car and making it. Last year, so a lot of learning curves, things like that. I'm excited to see. I think we might see times in those 39 seconds, a little bit quicker than those 500 horsepower. But here's the downside. Corey, this is the last race at this track as we know it.
I have heard that.
They are going to be, and I put together a graphic, that is in gray is the current track, and blue is the short track it is going to become, from what we have heard.
A longer Martinsville, if you will, just given the shape and the way that they.
Now, granted, this is just a graphic I found on the internet, right? I don't know how big or how.
Well,
short
it has
really
to be true
is.
then.
Yes, well, it's the internet. But here's the thing. I'm curious what could make this good, because I really hate, we've already lost Atlanta. It's a super speedway racing, right? They made that a plate track. Texas is getting reconfigured. We don't know what's going to happen there. Charlotte's the best track on the circuit, and it only gets one race because of the Roval, right? We've got Michigan and Kansas. Please don't touch those. But what's going to happen here, right? We already lost Chicagoland. Another 1.5-mile track that.
We also don't get the Brickyard anymore.
Right,
which,
the Brickyard.
I don't even want to. I could talk about that for a while.
Right. Well, they're talking about bringing that back. But what I'm curious with this is what the banking of the turns looks like, right? Especially considering you've already mentioned how wide the track is. If they keep the width of the front stretch, that could be very unique, where you have a very wide front stretch and maybe a thinner back stretch that's flat, and then you get a really big bank turn into a 5-wide front. That could create some really good racing. Not gonna lie. But I don't know if we need another short track, especially because the car is struggling on short tracks. So if the product doesn't bode well with this kind of track, I really don't understand why they can't just.
At first glance, this looks like a terrible idea to me. Why would you give up those guys going 5 wide in those big long turns? I don't understand.
200 miles an hour ripping it, baby.
I guess. Somebody thinks it's a good idea. Okay, fine, but I guess I'll believe it when I see it. But you're talking about something that's like what, a tenth of the size. It looks like it's so short.
Right.
It looks like the size of pit road based on this absolutely factually from the internet rendering that we're looking at here.
So fun fact, actually, my buddy Jeff, and on the if you see the graphic or the logo, the Intentional Wreck logo that we put together, that's actually Richmond. I made that because of we all met, or not all met, but we all went to Richmond together. That was Corey's first race. I've been informed actually that what is pit road on that graphic, it used to be the front stretch for Richmond. Richmond used to be like a true oval. So whenever it comes time for Richmond week, we're going to go back and watch one of those true oval races at Richmond. And then we're going to watch a couple other ones. They used to run the High Line at Richmond. Now, I know that's
they
weird
also
to
used
think.
to drive at night at Richmond. Sorry. I will try and refrain from outbursts from certain things.
I got to see. I was at the last night race for Richmond. So, but no, I'm really excited. This is my favorite kind of racing. And there's just there's so many talented intermediate car drivers, and I think that kind of segues into this kind of prediction. So, What do we think, guys? Who is your favorite to win the race this weekend?
All right. So for me, I have a realistic and a dark horse pick.
Okay.
My realistic pick for this race is going to be Kyle Busch. I think Kyle has his coming out party in the 8 car here. I thought he looked really good at Daytona. He looks good at this track at its current iteration already. He's won a few times. He knows how to run this track, and he knows how to stay ahead here. He knows what he's doing. My dark horse pick is Chris Buescher.
Okay.
I personally think that he was running really quick at Daytona. I think that we are at some point going to see him start running a little more in the front. I think Buescher punches his ticket to the playoffs this week. What do you think, Corey?
Well, I've been going back and forth today thinking about this. I had 2 guys in mind. One of them was Kyle Busch. You've already said Kyle Busch, so I will go ahead and move on to my second, and he's already been mentioned tonight, Tyler Reddick. So I think Tyler Reddick could be a big problem at a track like this, where he has this ability, it seems, to when things get spaced out and the lines aren't really clear, a la Bristol Dirt last year, and that Chase Briscoe quote mentioned him. He has this innate ability to just find his way through these weird, like, all kind of jumbled up packs. They're not racing in a straight line. They're kind of all over the place, and he can find his way through. I'm not going to take a dark horse. I'm going to go the other direction, and I'm going to say I am going to be very carefully watching the 9 this weekend of Chase Elliott, because I don't know what's going on with that guy, that team so far. He's looked terrible in both races, and he does not kind of come off that way to a new fan. It's like, wow, that 9 end of last year, he was unstoppable. And I don't know what happened. He's just fallen off. So I don't really have a dark horse pick. I'll take Tyler Reddick and Chase Elliott to do bad. How about that?
Okay. Well, I love your Reddick pick. I mean, seriously, you look back at the cars that had speed at the 1.5 miles. First of all, Reddick is one of the most talented drivers, and he's now in a great spot with Toyota. Not to mention just 23XI as a whole, right? They swept the Kansas races with both Bubba and Kurt. They look solid at 1.5 miles across the whole. I just think that they've got a really good program over there for that kind of racing, and they've got a great driver for that style. I expect Reddick to fully be one of the guys that's on that high lane first. But again, he took your Kyle Busch pick, and you took my Reddick pick. So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with I think the obvious guy to watch here is gonna be Kyle Larson. That's the very, very obvious pick. He's the defending winner here. He's one of the last time I think we ran like a true 1.5 miles was Homestead, and he blew the field away. I think Cliff Daniels, with a year on this car, I think they're going to bring a really good setup. So I'm excited. But there was an individual last year in this race that cleanly passed Kyle Larson inside, and then had the lead with 2 laps to go and messed up off the last turn, not the last turn, but one of the last turns, and went low, and it gave Kyle a run on the outside. And that was Daniel Suarez. Daniel Suarez also, if you go look back at how he did at the 600, had a very, very fast car. Something about Trackhouse, something about Daniel Suarez, they've got a little bit of speed. So Daniel Suarez is going to be my dark horse pick for this weekend. But those are 2 cars. The Chevys, though, they've been absolutely ripping these 1.5 miles, so I'm excited for that.
Can I just bring something up? You can cut this if I go with your,
Oh, go ahead.
This is a 2-mile track.
Right. So I keep saying,
am I missing I didn't know if I was missing a thing. It's a 2-mile track.
Intermediate, right? 1.5 miles, yeah. Intermediate is what I mean to say.
Because before this hits wax, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just wanted to make sure before it comes out and somebody's listening, you're like, what the hell is this guy talking about? It's a 2-mile track.
Oh, I thought maybe you were going to say something like, hey, Finn, this whole time.
No, I'm making sure that I'm like, I want you to know I'm not trying to be a dick here. I'm trying to put this out here to, just so you know. Before people,
Jeff's OCD could not make it through this entire episode without it. We wouldn't allow it.
I'm trying to help.
I apologize.
I want to be helpful.
So just to be clear, right? There's 4 types of tracks. I can't name any of them, apparently. No. There's super speedways, okay? You're going to hear plate race super speedway. If I say 1.5 miles, we mean the intermediate tracks, right? They're not all the same, okay? Sure. Is Phoenix a short track or intermediate? It's 1 mile long. I don't know. My whole point is 1.5 miles, 2 miles. These are non-plate super speedway speedways.
That is fine,
tracks.
And we can.
No, we're not cutting it. I'm keeping it. Look at this. Look at this meanie. All right, everybody, comment in the chat. On a scale of 0 to Sid from Toy Story, how mean is Jeff Page?
0.
Why are you booing me? I'm right. Anyway.
I want to give a quick shout out to an individual. I can't remember her name, but I tweeted out. She said, "Is there any new podcast to watch?" And I said, "Can we drop ours?" She said, "Yes."
Naomi.
Yes, was it Naomi?
That is Naomi.
So
yes.
I shout out to Naomi. If you did watch last week's episode, if you watched this episode, I then looked into her Twitter bio, and it had a number for all her favorite drivers, and did have the number 12 of Ryan Blaney. So I apologize in advance for the Blaney hates.
Nicely chosen.
But we appreciate any of the new viewers to the podcast throughout the weeks. We've been super excited to do this every week, and I think after this race, we're going to even be more amped. We're here, baby.
Oh, I'm pumped. For sure.
Well, I think that about wraps things up for this week. I'm excited to go and see what happens at Auto Club. I think we got some good racing ahead of us. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter, and that's at INTWRECKPOD. That's at intwreckpod. You can also find us on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on iHeartRadio. Please like, subscribe, share, tell your friends. Spread the word. We would love to get some more listeners, viewers, followers, anything else. Let's talk. This one's for the fans. We want to talk with you. We want to interact with you. We will be posting our fantasy picks. We'll be live tweeting races. We are very friendly. We do not bite. Please chat with us, tweet with us. Let's get an interaction going. And with that, I think it's about time that we cut it and call it for this week.
Oh yeah. Auto Club, baby. Fontana /California.